Hey, in my little office here, you can see it is packed up with stuff because we are cleaning out our house. And we might rent, we might sell. We're actually not completely decided on that. There's some things that are contingent on which one we do. But I wanted to make a video about something I've been thinking about lately. And it involves learning. So when you're thinking about learning, it is very helpful to define what learning actually is. And again, this is going to be kind of a ramble for me to watch in the future, maybe learn something from my past self. But I have kind of defined learning as the amount of behavior change that happens when there is new information that comes into my consciousness. So that's a very complex definition, but it can be shortened down to basically when I consume new information, I act differently. If that happens, if I consume new information, then I act differently. If that happens, then learning has occurred. So I'll give some examples, and then I will tell you what I have learned about learning. So I have not recorded one of these videos in a while, so it's probably going to be super shaky. So the first example is if you read a book. So if you read a book and there's something in the book that is telling you to do, or something to try, or a mental model to think about, if you read that book and nothing in your life changes, like you read the book, you're like, that was a nice book, and nothing changes in your life, you didn't actually learn anything from that book. Now, if you read that book and it's like, this is how you create a habit, maybe you're wanting to brush your teeth at night, and you apply that and you actually start trying to brush your teeth. You don't even have to actually get the habit of brushing your teeth, but you try, you attempt. Your behavior has changed because you read the book. That is learning. Now, it might not be the outcome that you wanted, but you are learning. Your behavior is changing because of something that you've consumed. Another example is just watching a TV show or a YouTube video. Maybe you watch a YouTube video that is explaining a hypothetical or a theoretical mental model about how to deal with strangers. You're like, well, I'm not that good at making friends. I'm going to watch a video about how to meet up with strangers, talk to them, and turn them into friends. If they teach you a mental model about how to deal with friends and what to talk about with strangers, but you don't actually do anything, you haven't actually learned anything. Now, if you apply that mental model, and the next time you see a stranger, you try to use it, you're like, what can I talk about? And then you think back to that mental model, and you're like, oh, I can talk about family, I can talk about my job, I have things to talk about, I can actually use this mental model. You have actually learned. You are applying what you learned. What you have consumed. You're actually learning because you're applying it, your behavior is changing. So that's another example. Another example is going to college. If you go to college, you get a 4-year degree, and then once you're done with college, you don't actually go out in the real world and get a job. Technically, you could say that you've learned stuff in college. But if your behavior doesn't change, you didn't really learn anything. It's like in a laboratory, if there's a mouse and you're trying to get it to do something, but you tell the mouse in English language, this is what I want you to do. You could say that the mouse has learned what you said, but the mouse's behavior didn't change. So even though the mouse heard what you said, it saw your mouth moving, it didn't actually learn anything. That's kind of what happens when people go to college, and their behavior doesn't change once they're out of college. They don't get a job that has to do with what they learned in college. So if it's in accounting, if your behavior doesn't change to become an accountant every day, you didn't learn anything. And of course, there's a whole argument to be made that maybe you learned something that was subconscious, that maybe in college you learned to work harder, even though you went to become an accountant. You don't want to be an accountant. So what you really learned was that if you just work hard, you can do whatever you want. So anyways, I'm not saying college, this isn't an argument for or against college. I'm saying a lot of people are going to college and they're not really learning. They're just going through the motions. Another example is church. A lot of people go to church for entertainment. They don't go to church to learn, to become a better person. And so an example of church is if you learn something in church, how could you change your behavior? And I know not everyone goes to church. There's other types of community events that you go to that is supposed to help develop you as a person. But church is a really good example because there's a lot of people that go to church. They listen to what the speaker has to say, and then their life doesn't change. Nothing changes. Their behavior stays the same. Even though they go every Sunday or every Saturday, nothing changes. That's a really good example of going, but not learning anything because your behavior doesn't change. Now, maybe you listen to a really good sermon or a really good speaker about being kind to people. Well, if in the next couple weeks you actually implement that and you try to be kinder to people, you do things that you didn't do before, then you could say that you learned something during that speech. Another example is being around a mentor. If you're around a mentor, you're like, I'm going to seek out a mentor to help me with this problem. Like maybe a mentor can be as simple as learning another language. It can be business. It can be maybe I want to lose weight, get a personal trainer. If they're like, hey, if you want to lose weight, stop drinking, and you're paying them to be a personal trainer, and you still drink, you're paying them not to learn anything. If you're like, hey, I want to learn how to lose weight, and they're like, number one, stop drinking. Like, you don't even have to exercise. You don't even have to eat better. Just stop drinking. You will lose, stop drinking alcohol. You will lose weight. And then you don't take that advice, you're not learning anything. Your behavior has not changed. So when it comes to learning stuff, you can tell if you've learned something if you compare your current behavior to your past behavior and they're different. If they are the same, you technically have not learned anything. I guess you can make another argument that maybe you have learned that your behavior was correct in the first place. But the argument I'm making here is that learning is usually when your behavior changes due to new information. So if we use this definition, intelligent people or wise people are people that just learn quickly. So you are more intelligent if you immediately do something, like your behavior immediately changes. So if you read a book and it's like, do 100 push-ups a day and you'll get strong. And then that day you do 100 push-ups, even if it takes you like all day, like you do sets of 10, you are technically an intelligent person because your behavior, the rate at which you learned is quick. It's very short. On the other hand, you are less intelligent if you don't do anything. Like if you watch a YouTube video with advice and you're like, that's good advice, but you don't do anything, you're not intelligent by this definition. Now the other half of this, the other side of this, is that if your behavior isn't constantly changing, you're not learning. And so I was thinking about this. I really like the idea that learning is when your behavior changes. And I was like, how can I make a video that actually relates this to my real life? I'm kind of in a rut. My life isn't really changing. And I look into it and I'm like, that's where I can apply this. I'm not learning anything. And because I'm not learning anything, my behavior isn't changing, or vice versa. My behavior is not changing because I'm not learning anything. So I guess, future Theodore, if you feel like you're in a rut, if you feel like you're not progressing in life, one of the reasons may be because you're listening to stuff, but you're not changing your behavior to fit whatever you're being told. You're not trying stuff. You're not testing stuff. And when I look back in my life and I feel like, wow, that was the most growth I've had in a couple months, it's usually during that time I'm testing all kinds of things. In fact, I watched a video I made a while ago, and it was a video about testing things. And I thought back to when I made that video. I was like, man, I was changing as a person very quickly. I was being intelligent because I was testing all kinds of stuff. I was growing. So this video is kind of a ramble, but now after I've made the ramble, I understand my thoughts way better, which is usually the case with these videos. But I guess to sum it up, learning is when your behavior changes due to new information. So if you're just getting new information but you're not changing your behavior, you're not actually learning anything. And on the flip side of that, if your behavior hasn't changed in a while, if you look back in the last year and you're like, my life has been the exact same day every day for a whole year, it's probably because you're not learning anything. You're not actually taking action. Your behavior is not changing due to what you're learning. And so by making this video, that's one little thing I'm going to start to think about. What can I do today? What can I do tomorrow? What can I do next week that is outside of my normal comfort level, my normal set of experiences of behaviors that I do on a daily basis? What is one thing that I can do just a little differently to basically facilitate learning, to actually learn? Again, this video is kind of like, it's probably not going to make sense to whoever watches this. I kind of rambled all over the place, but it makes a lot of sense to me now. And the point I got out of this was that basically, if you feel like you're stuck, you just need to actually change your behavior. Do something that you wouldn't normally do. A word for this is spontaneous. Be more spontaneous. Do more strange, unusual, out of the ordinary things, because you will definitely learn from those experiences. So we're approaching 10 minutes here, so I'm going to go ahead and hop off here. I'll see you guys later.